Welcome back, everyone, to another bonus episode of the DCL Duo podcast brought to you by My Path Unwinding Travel and the WDW magazine, which publishes both the WDW magazine, the DLR magazine, and newly DCL magazine. I am your host today, Sam. As you can tell from the fact that I did the show intro, Brian is not available to be with me today. But of course, I'm not solo because I always have a fabulous guest with me whenever I'm hosting by myself. And today is no exception. I am super excited to welcome to the show Tammy Whiting. Welcome to the show, Tammy.
Thank you very much.
It's so wonderful to have you. It's your first time on our show, but you are no stranger to Disney Cruise Line. So before we jump into the topic at hand, and let's not spoil the surprise as to who you are, Tammy, but let's get your background with cruising and Disney cruising and Disney in general.
Okay, let's see. Longtime Disney lover. We honeymooned at Disney many, many years ago. We started cruising.
I love that.
Yeah. We started cruising in 2005. So,
awesome.
Which seems like forever ago now. We started off.
It was 20 years ago, Tammy.
It was 20 years ago. We started off a little slow, I guess, because our first one was in 2005, and I don't think our second was until 2008, maybe. And it wasn't because we didn't love it. We loved it. But, time and money and all of that, slowed us down a little bit. But they've picked up greatly in the last several years. And now I have just passed, I think, 63 Disney cruises.
Wow, amazing. Do you have your name on Castaway Cay by any chance?
I do.
I love that. I can't wait till we have that. Yeah.
It's pretty exciting. I go see it every time. I like to say it's the most expensive, plank I've ever bought in my entire life, but totally worth it.
Totally. It's funny you say that because I always joke about my DVC backpack being the most expensive backpack I ever bought.
That's true. That's true.
But yeah, I love that. So 60 plus cruises. Wow. And you and I got to meet on one of those cruises very recently on the preview for the Disney Treasure. And you were also a travel agent. How long have you been doing that?
Let's see. I've been doing that for about 18 years. I opened the Storybook Destinations, the agency, 11 years ago. So for the last 11 years, I've been doing that.
That's awesome. And you sponsor the Disney Cruise Line blog, is that right?
Oh, we do. We sponsor all their group cruises, and we work closely with Scott. He's, a wealth of knowledge, as you know, so we love working with him.
Awesome. Well, now I will spoil or spill the beans. You are the new lead author for the Unofficial Guide's 2025 edition of Disney Cruising. Or Disney Cruise Line 2025, I should say. That's the title. The Unofficial Guide, Disney Cruise Line 2025. And so that's what we're going to focus on talking about today. But Tammy, tell me, how did this gig come up? I know that Aaron Foster and Len Test have been doing these unofficial guides for a long time, and you are the newest addition to that team and the lead author. So how did that come to be?
Yes, it's very exciting. I've been a fan of Unofficial Guides. I've read them now for, 20, 25 years. Love the books always. And so when I wrote blogs for touring plans for several years, and Disneyland at first, and then I switched over to Disney Cruise Line blogs. And so I did that for many years. And so when Lynn told me that he and Aaron were going to write the first cruise line book, I was super excited that they were making a cruise line edition. And I got to contribute just a little bit every time, and some stateroom updates, stateroom information, and things like that. And so I did that for many years. So I think 10 years now they've been doing it. And
oh, wow. Yeah.
Yeah. So when Erin was ready to move on last year and she passed it off, I got to take over, and it's like a dream come true. Super excited.
Yeah, that's awesome. I love that. It's I would love to do something like that. I'm a full-time lawyer, so I don't know that I have the time to write a book, but if there was going to be something that I would do instead of being a lawyer, that would seem like a really fun fun journey to take. But how much time, I'd love to know sort of some of the logistics of how much time it takes to write, or I will say rewrite a book, because obviously there was an existing or several existing editions of the book, the 2024 one being the most recent. And I showed you, I have them both sitting here with me today, and I was looking at them, and the 2025 one is quite a bit thicker than the 2024, like almost twice as thick, I'm going to say. Maybe not twice as, but like probably a third, an additional third at least. And so how does one go about writing or rewriting a book like The Unofficial Guide?
So Erin, let me say, was a great help when I first started, and she talked me through a lot of the process, when the due deadlines were for certain things, and how she went about it, and how she kept it up to date every year. And so I took that and started writing. I guess I was keeping notes before that, but I started writing last year, about a year ago now, for the 2025 edition, and started actually reworking the book that was there. I took what was an excellent base, of course, and reorganized some things to just what was more natural to flow to me. And then, so first I reorganized, made a plan of what it was going to look like when I was done with it, and then started writing the individual chapters. And you have to really go through, and your brain sees what you want it to see, and you go through and you read things and think, oh yeah, that's still true. And then later you go back for a second or third read and go, of course that's not true.
Well, and the crazy thing about writing a book like this, for over the course of a year, I would also think, is the fact that things are constantly changing, right? And at some point you have like a cutoff date when this thing is due to print, right? So you can't make changes anymore. But like, how is it that, like, do you have to keep rewriting sections when Disney is constantly changing things on us?
We do. And I think I probably drove my editor crazy this year, because the deadline to turn it over to her was July 1st. And then she goes back and forth with me for a while. And we turned it in, I think, to the publisher, I think September 1st. But multiple days, she's sending me the finished product of each chapter, and I'm like, oh, that's great. And then 2 days later, Disney would make another announcement, and I'd go back and I'd say, no, wait, can we change this? And the last one I changed was really important. I had put a tip in there. I'd added my own tip because I've had to do this before, that you could, if you forgot your passport on a closed loop cruise, a cruise that starts and ends in the same United States city, which I sadly have done. I did once and almost had when I realized the night before that I had not packed it, that you could get on with a copy of your birth certificate. And so my husband emailed me a copy from home of my birth certificate. I printed it out. I had a very, bad printout of it, took it, no problem at all. So I put as a tip, to keep a copy of your birth certificate in the cloud, just in case. Mm-hmm. And it might, get you up a hard spot like it did me. And I think it was September 1st. I think the publisher had it, and Disney changed their policy that it has to be the original now. You cannot take a copy anymore. And I just thought, oh my goodness, if people got to the cruise port and said, this book right here told me I could do. So
my gosh.
I emailed her. I said, please, is there any way we can change this? And she worked with me. We put something else there in its place, and it all worked. So.
Oh, that's so good. Yeah, that would keep me up at night too. I'm the same way. Brian and I are very much about accuracy, right? Yes. And there are times where we can't be 100% accurate because we're not sure, or Disney hasn't said, what their policy is, or we know that Disney might have a policy that says X, but sometimes they'll do Y or Z, right? Like sometimes things are, and so we're always trying to give that caveat on the show, and we can do it orally, of course, that Disney changes things all the time, and you might have different luck with different cast members and things like that. But it's hard when it's in print, right? Because it's in print. It's not changeable in the same way as I can pop onto the podcast and tell people, hey, remember that thing I told you 6 weeks ago? Ignore that. It's wrong now. Yeah.
Right. We do keep a page of updates, of corrections, I should say, that things that Disney has changed after we went to print, and we'll update that all year long, because things are going to change all the way up until the next edition, of course.
Oh, of course, of course. So yeah, and then and that would be on your website then, right? For the
Yes,
unofficial
it's on
guides.
the
Yeah.
Unofficial Guide website. Yep.
Yeah, that makes complete sense. Now, I want to jump in and talk about what additions, because like I mentioned, the book is a lot thicker this year. I can think of a couple of things that have happened in the last year that would necessitate the book being longer, in particular. But what were the things that are really big additions to this year's book, as opposed to last year's book?
Yeah, I really expanded the stateroom section. I think that's one of the hardest decisions that people make, and really it's not as consequential as you think it is, when you're making that decision. But it's very hard, especially for a first timer. That it's not, what on earth do they pick? Are there bad rooms? Are there good rooms? So I feel like that's really important. So I spent a lot of time on that and updating the floor plans for every category, because they vary enough. Some of them vary enough that you really should see a different floor plan than the other ones. But most of them are similar in the same category, but there are exceptions to that. So I tried to really build on that. And then also I added some suggestions for where to stay the night before for some of their most common departure ports and excursions. Added up. I know that Erin, she used to do a lot of excursions, but as Disney grew and as their ports grew, it became a lot to keep up with. So I tried to add some of that back in with their most common itineraries. I can't do, 15 different Europe
Oh,
itineraries.
of course. Well, and that's a good point because the European itineraries are so varied and they go to so many cities. I mean, you can give recommendations maybe for Barcelona or Civitavecchia or Southampton where they're sailing out of fairly regularly, right? But you can't do it for every port stop because they do so many different port stops, and they might do, one like the Azores. They only do that on the transatlantic, right, back and forth, right? So it might not make sense to give, a lot of deep recommendations for the Azores, but it makes sense to give recommendations for where to stay in Southampton or London or something like that. Yeah,
Right.
that
Yes.
makes sense.
So that's what I did. I picked some of those ports, like you mentioned, and the next year, I'm hoping to keep expanding on that every year and add some more ideas for what you're going to do if you want to do something on your own, what's a walking tour of that port, like things like that. That's what I'm hoping to add to every year.
Oh, that's awesome. And I imagine that you're covering the Caribbean ports and Bahamian ports more deeply than like some of those ports in Europe. Yeah. Now, another big thing that is added, of course, is Lookout Key. There was no there was no Lookout Key prior to this June 2024. How difficult was it to put in information about Lookout Key when your deadline was July 1st, right? Lookout Key only, I think that's when you met, I think, Brian for the first time, was the Lookout Key preview cruise. But how hard was that to get information into the book about Lookout Key when you had just this really short time of sailings to Lookout Key before your book draft was due?
Right. Yeah. I booked a second cruise in June just for that reason. I thought, oh my goodness, what if we didn't make it for it? Or, I need to go at least once and preferably twice. So I did go twice before I had to turn it in. But, every time I go back, I see something different that, I'll add to for next time. But there were some things that I had to make an educated guess on, like Christmas decorations. I was like, I'm 99% sure they're going to put Christmas decorations up there. And so I put that there were, but then when it actually happened, I thought, oh, thank goodness.
I love that. Like, well, and then we still have things that are not like done at Lookout. Like, how do you deal with those things? For example, there is no 5K at Lookout Key yet, right? But I think all of us big Disney fans think that there will eventually be a 5K at Lookout. The bike paths, you can't do bike rentals yet, but we've been told you will be able to, but we don't know anything about, a lot of these excursions that haven't happened yet at Lookout. How do you handle things like that when you're trying to educate, as people as much as possible about what Disney Cruise Line offers?
Yeah, it is tricky, like you mentioned. And bikes, we've all been thinking for months there's going to be bikes, and they're still not using the bikes. And so we certainly don't. I don't want to say anything, mislead anybody, and say things that have not happened. But there are some things there's some things we can make an educated guess on. We can make an educated guess next year on what the Destiny is going to look like. What the layout's going to be because of our previous experience with other ships. So there are some things we can make educated guesses on. But there's also things that we have to avoid talking about because we're not positive yet,
Yeah. Well, I mean, even right, the expansion announcement to 13 ships, right? I think that probably happened before the book was due, but we didn't have any information about what those other ships would look like, beyond the Destiny.
Right? We had no idea it was going to be. Well, I could have. I could have speculated that it would be a smaller class ship, but we had no idea if that would actually happen. And so, no, yeah, we can't say anything about the size or anything like that yet, or we couldn't.
Yeah. That's such an interesting, difference between a podcast and a book, because we love to speculate all the time. I'm gonna put this out. I mean, we always tell people, "Hey, we're speculating here. We like to call it prognosticating on this show." And they are educated guesses, like you said, right? You could speculate based on you and I and others in this space who are sort of deeply into Disney Cruise Line. We are Disney Cruise Line devotees, as I like to call us. We can make pretty decent educated guesses about what the cruise line will or will not do. But again, it's still, there's quite a bit of speculation in those thoughts. And so, yeah, we can do that, but we're not promising anything in our podcast. We're telling people this is a prognostication. It's a little different to put it in print and to say this is a prognostication, right?
It is. I did make one short chapter. The very last chapter of the book is all speculating on what may come one day. But it's very clear. This is all speculation. This is nothing firm here. Mm-hmm.
Well, I want to hear about your thoughts then. I want to actually, I will confess, I haven't had a chance to read the book yet. We only recently got it. And so I want to talk about what you think the future is. And then I want to talk a little bit about the treasure, because I know you just got off the treasure. As I mentioned, you and I were on the preview together, and then you just got on a 7-night sailing, or just got off, I should say, a 7-night sailing like this past week. So I'd love to hear, of course, your thoughts on the treasure, and then thoughts for the Destiny that's coming out later this year on the Adventure. But I want to talk prognostication a little bit. We now know, for the 13 ships, we have a little bit more information, right? We now know how the fleet is going to grow to 13, more than, just the number 13, but we know what years the ships are coming out, and we know the sizes of those ships. What do you think about this smaller class of ships and the expansion of the Wish class? We didn't know until this most recent announcement that we were going to have 5 Wish class ships, essentially, and I'm including the OLC Wish class ship in that number. But what do you think about Disney Cruise Line's decision to have 5 Wish class ships? It's the first time they'll have that many ships of a same class. And then, of course, about these 3 new ships that we'll have that will be 3,000 passengers, 100,000 gross tons, bigger than the Magic class, smaller than the Dream or Wish classes. Love to hear your thoughts.
Yeah, the Wish, when the Wish first came out, I don't think anyone would have predicted that they would add on more Wish ships, because it wasn't overly well received. And I'll qualify that by longtime Disney fans. First timers loved that ship. Everyone we talked to that was their first time on a Disney cruise loved that ship. But longtime Disney cruisers were expecting some things that were not there. And they didn't love it. And I will say that even in that category of people, when they go back, they tend to like it more. That's the other thing I've experienced.
100%. We have said the exact same thing, Tammy, that like it's a stark contrast. I will say we liked the Wish when we first went out. There were certain things we didn't quite understand, but we thought she was beautiful. We were on the maiden voyage. She wasn't quite ready. She wasn't quite show ready, but other than not being show ready, we loved a lot of the decisions that they had made, even though we questioned others. But I feel like there were a lot of longtime Disney Cruise fans who hated the Wish when she first came out, and then went on her, and we were like, I guess she's not so bad. And then maybe went on her a second time, and we're like, oh, she's really fantastic. Or, she's got a lot of good, even though I don't, they must still say, I don't like that she doesn't have midship elevators, or I don't like that she doesn't have a running track. But there's a lot to love on the Wish.
There is a lot to love on the Wish. And it's interesting because some of the things that people dislike the most were very standard on other cruise lines. Other cruise lines don't have walking tracks. They don't have 3 elevator banks, and nobody questioned those. But as soon as Disney did it for the first time, because we were used to something else, people were upset about it.
Absolutely. It's so funny. everybody with Disney fans always want, they want something new, but we want you to keep everything the same at the same time.
Absolutely. Absolutely. We want something new, but we also want we don't want anything to change that we loved.
Impossible, impossible. Well, what do you think about the decision to expand? Well, let's talk about expanding the fleet as a general sense, right? This is a lot of growth in a short period of time. I mean, even just the Wish, the Treasure, and the Destiny, and then of course the Adventure coming out all in within 5 years. That's a lot of growth, and now we have this decision that they're gonna grow the fleet even more with another 5 ships after that, right? So we're going to be going from 8 at the end of this year, at the end of 2025, to 13 by the end of 2031. I mean, what do you think about that decision by Disney Cruise Line? It's somewhat of a risky proposition.
It is a little bit risky. When you look at a company like Royal Caribbean that, has 20, not 30 ships, almost 30 ships maybe now, I think, you think, well, Disney still has a long way to go. But also, you do have to wonder, when do they tap out? When have they met their potential? But I do think there's room for growth. The cruise industry as a whole is just growing by leaps and bounds as more people try cruising, some for the first time, but as more people try it and realize, hey, I really like it and want to, try different lines. And so it's growing. CLIA, the cruise industry organization, is predicting just huge growth in the next couple of years. So Disney adding on makes sense that they're going to try to get some of that growth. So I'm not totally surprised. I'm excited, super excited. I was also watching the D23 when they made that announcement, expecting them to announce 2 ships, probably to replace the Magic and Wonder. And when they put all those ships up there, it was so exciting.
Totally.
So exciting.
That was our reaction. We actually had the DCL dude, Wes, on our show. We were doing a live show watching D23 announcements with Wes and with our other friend CT, who is known in our community as Tinfoil Mouse Ears because he loves to prognosticate. And so all of us, like, when they announced all those ships, our jaws just dropped. We were just like, what? Like, what are you talking about? But what about the thought to go smaller with these 3 ships that have just been announced by Disney, specifically, as I mentioned, to carry 3,000 passengers and to be approximately 100,000 gross tons, which, as I mentioned, is in between the Magic class and the Dream class, and of course the Wish class. Wish class and the Dream class, people always think Wish class is bigger, but passenger-wise, it's really not bigger. It's only slightly bigger. They're really just bigger because of the fuel capacity areas, and the crew areas are bigger, but the passenger areas are really not bigger. But yeah, what do you think about the decision to go smaller? Royal mostly has gone bigger, although now they have some new smaller ships announced as well. But overall, the industry seems to go bigger and bigger and bigger. And Disney's decision here is to go smaller, with the exception of the Wish class.
Yeah, it's true. The industry as a whole is going bigger and bigger, or super small, and they're leaving this gap in the middle here between, expedition-sized ships and these giant cruise ships. And I'm super excited about the size. I think the Magic and the Wonder, they can't sail forever. As much as we love them, there's going to be a point where it costs too much to upkeep them and to Disney standards. And so I'm not totally surprised that they're going smaller, a little bit smaller than their, bigger ships. I'm not totally surprised they're going smaller to one day replace those 2 ships. The people that love the smaller ships will still have something similar, if not the exact same size, something similar that will. So I think they do need something for those people that love those smaller sizes and just really don't like the giant, mega cruise ship.
Yeah, agreed. What do you think about the Adventure and how that's going to do, sort of in relation? Because the Adventure is a class of its own, right? It will be the only ship in the Adventure class. I doubt that Disney will make another, unless, I don't know, maybe I'll be proven wrong. Maybe it'll be wildly successful and they'll build one from the ground up just like it. But I would be kind of shocked if that happened. But curious what you think, or how you think the Adventure is going to sort of fit into the Disney portfolio.
It is going to be interesting. I feel like, if it's a huge success, I can definitely see them building another one day. But it's going to be also hard to measure that success, because I think for a lot of Americans that are going to be traveling over there, and I am in January, I'm so excited to see it and to try it. But at some point, the number of people that love Disney and are willing to, get on a 30-hour flight to go experience this new ship is probably going to run out. And so
Yeah, yeah.
they can probably still fill it without us, but I'm not sure that will be a true measure of success if they built one closer to us. And it'll be interesting. I'm really excited. I think it's neat that they took this giant ship that's so different than any other Disney ship they have, but they put some of the things that we love on it, like animators and some of our familiar things on there. So, oh, I cannot wait to try it.
I think it's going to be wildly successful, at least at the beginning. And then we'll kind of see. I mean, it seems like it has already been wildly successful in terms of inaugural season sales and whatnot. But it will be interesting to see, you're right, like how much. There'll be completionists like you and like Brian who are going over there at the early end. And then there's people like me who don't want to be on a 30-hour flight. And as much as I want to be a completionist, I will say I do eventually want to sail on her, but I'm not, well, the timing isn't going to work out for me to sail on her in the first couple of months. And so that will hopefully be down the road. But yeah, it will be super interesting to see how things grow. I'm curious about what you think the lifespan we've got left on the Magic and the Wonder. You mentioned in your comments about, they can't keep refurbing them forever because at some point it becomes prohibitively expensive to upkeep them. Of course, we also know that the fuel standards change year after year, and different ports have different standards about that. We know that both ships have been, retrofitted more recently. In particular, the Wonder, they had to do a lot of work before she was able to sail over to New Zealand and Australia because they have very strict environmental regulations in that part of the world. But yeah, I'm curious what you think the lifespan, like when do you think they might retire? And again, this is complete prognostication. We have no inside information from Disney, but I'm just curious as a big fan and somebody, sort of deep into this and in researching and thinking about Disney Cruise Line, what you think, Tammy.
I would have said not long. I would have said 2 or 3 years. I would have said it was coming quickly. But when they said 13 ships, I said, okay.
Right?
Unless they're going to build two more somewhere else in there, then they're making it to make at least have 13 for, a few days.
Right. I know that same. We said the same thing, like at least through the end of 2031, right? Because if they say we're going to have 13 by 2031, you got to at least have 13 for a whole year.
Right, you would think. Yeah.
Yeah. But I think it's going to be, I think a little bit past that, right? Like I think a couple years, because I don't think the three that they announce are actually going to be the replacements for the Magic and the Wonder. I think we're going to see two more ships coming in the early 2030s. Before, when I say early 2030s, I mean before maybe 2035, not necessarily 2031, but like to actually replace. I hope, I keep saying, I hope there'll be like the Magic 2 and the Wonder 2, and that they'll, port in a lot of the IP and a lot of the, the theming that we love from those two ships. But who knows? That's just me hoping, and hope is not a strategy. So hope is not a business strategy. Well, I'd love to talk about the Treasure and the Destiny. You mentioned you are a fan of the Wish, despite the fact that we know, and as what we've talked about, lots of people did not maybe love the Wish when she first came out, but you got to go on the Treasure now twice. So we've spent, 10 nights on the Treasure between the preview and your recent sailing. I'd love to know your thoughts. What are the pluses, the minuses? Give it to me.
I love the Treasure. I absolutely love it. Now, I like Wish class ships, but I love it. And I think it's very interesting that everyone seems to love it. And it's the same basic structure as the Wish. And
I know, that makes me
people
laugh.
do not like the basic structure of the Wish. That's the biggest complaint about the Wish is the basic, and it's the same structure.
I wonder though if you think though, then we were not sailing when the Dream first came out, but I wonder if that was the kind of the same thing that happened with the Dream class. They were very similar to the Magic and the Wonder in their layout, but quite a bit bigger, obviously, and then certain spaces are of course very differently themed. Like the adult spaces, I'm thinking, have this completely different personas on the Dream class than the Magic class. I wonder, and you started cruising earlier than we did. I wonder if maybe that was the same thing that happened, or if if the same thing happened, but by the time the fantasy came out, everyone was like so used to the Dream, they were like, oh, it's a great ship,
You may be right. I don't remember people disliking the Dream as much as some people dislike the Wish, but I definitely remember people like, oh, I never want to go on that ship. It's huge. There's too many people.
Too many people. And then now they're going on Icon of the Seas on Royal Caribbean with like 6,000 of their closest friends.
Exactly.
Now, I'm curious. I know you have a chapter about other cruise lines and other cruising opportunities. Of course, we know in this space you mentioned a couple of different options. We have these smaller expedition ships. We know of course river cruising on Adventures by Disney. But there's a lot of large ship cruising competitors for Disney, and I'm curious for the Disney cruiser. What if somebody were to come to you either as their travel agent or as the writer of the Unofficial Guides Disney Cruise Line 2025 and said, I love Disney Cruise Line, but their pricing has just gotten out of control, and I just can't spring a Disney cruise for this year's spring break trip. Which cruise line would you send them on, if not Disney Cruise Line?
It would depend on the cruiser. If we were talking about adults, then I would probably steer them towards Celebrity, although Celebrity can, their newer edge class ships are beautiful. I love them. And that's my favorite when I'm doing Celebrity is one of those ships. But the, adults, I would steer there. But if someone had teenagers, younger kids, more, then I'm probably going to go to Royal Caribbean. And
yeah.
I'll caveat that by saying they're newer ships. And it doesn't have to be a giant ship, but just one of their newer ships, because I do feel like their older ships don't have quite as much to do, and they are feeling their age in some places. But the newer ships are great. And they're not, in my mind, there's a reason. I mean, to me, I should say, Disney charges more for a reason. There are some things that are upgraded experience, and I can nitpick some little things at Royal Caribbean, but I've had great Royal Caribbean cruises. So and it costs less. And there's, sometimes there's a reason why it costs less, and sometimes it's totally worth it. It's totally worth that reason. I can bring my own shampoo and conditioner and pay less and be happy.
That's right. Because if you're sailing in the non-suite class on Royal, you get shampoo, conditioner, body wash all in one. It's terrible. I don't know. It's horrible. And so, Tammy is right, though. It will still cost you less if you're going to bring along your own. You can bring on some fancy, you could buy some nice Paul Mitchell shampoo, conditioner, body wash, and it'll still cost you less than the difference between. Yeah. What about the sort of all-inclusive? It's no cruise line is 100% no large ship cruising is really 100% all-inclusive, I should say. There are add-ons where you can make it basically all-inclusive. But what do you think about the Disney's sort of differentiation to be sort of mostly inclusive versus other cruise lines being less inclusive as far as, those sort of add-ons? And, I'm always curious when you think about the price point. We've tried to crunch the numbers on this, and generally speaking, we still think most of the time Disney Cruise Line comes out more expensive. But I'm curious from your perspective as a TA and as someone who obviously wrote this book, where you think those sort of the value lies with Disney Cruise Line versus some of these other cruise lines.
I think some of the value is not, quantifiable in dollars. It's the crew, it's the entertainment, it's the family friendly atmosphere. And as a parent, when my kids were younger, for sure, that really mattered to me a lot. I didn't need to walk by a pool where they were doing, where a movie was playing that may have some colorful language, on the Funnel Vision, their version of Funnel Vision. And so I appreciate the family friendliness of Disney and the lack of a casino. Some people love casinos, so that's totally fine. But I appreciate not having them on every ship. And so some of it's not quantifiable. If you start dollars to dollars, Royal Caribbean Icon since you mentioned Icon, is actually pretty expensive for
Quite
Royal.
expensive. Yeah. No, you're right. The newest of so I think when you're talking about new-ish ships, right? Like with Royal, you can get more bang for your buck. But if you're talking about the newest ships, probably not so much. So like Icon and Utopia are quite expensive. And you look at them dollars to donuts to Disney Cruise Line, and there's really not a whole light between them. And Disney Cruise Line is more inclusive in stuff. But of course, then if you look at some of the suite class stuff and what it includes, I will say Royal Caribbean's doing a lot of really great things with that class. And I mean, I look at sort of the concierge experience, and we've sailed both regular and concierge, lately more regular. But I will say, I think that's one area where Disney Cruise Line is maybe falling behind some of the industry. I'm curious what you think about that.
Some of the inclusions for concierge, you mean?
Yeah. I feel like you get a lot more in terms of, not that Disney Concierge isn't wonderful. It is a wonderful level of service, but you get more inclusive stuff. I'm thinking, more your alcohol fully included, your specialty dining fully included, more priority for reserving things, butler service, things that you don't get on Disney Cruise Line. Curious what you think about that trend.
A restaurant that only concierge guests can go to. Yeah. Things like
Yeah,
that. Yeah.
exactly.
I concierge on Disney, like you said, it's a wonderful experience. And one of the best things about it are those hosts. They're amazing. Those concierge hosts are just amazing. But could they do more? Yeah, they could. And especially with the price that they're charging, they absolutely could do more there. I think it's very interesting what they're going to do with the adventure, and we'll see. We'll see how it plays out. But they're saying concierge is going to be like a ship within a ship, and they're going to have everything. Yeah, I've heard people say they may have their own kids clubs. Which seems a little interesting. That seems interesting to me, but I've been told that a couple of different times. So we'll see
Interesting.
if that
Oh,
pans
I
out. Be like
hadn't
their
heard
own
that.
stores, their own restaurant, of course, their own area.
Their own
So
spa. I
yeah,
heard
their
that
own
part.
spa.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah. I have heard at least one like restaurant space, or I don't know if it's quick serve or what, but, or if it's just going to be breakfast or, what it is exactly going to be. But yeah, the spa I had heard, and I had heard some exclusive stores, but I hadn't heard kids club. That would be very
It would be
interesting.
very interesting. I don't know how well that will go over, but it would be very interesting. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, you'll have to report back to us, Tammy, after your January cruise, because, Brian is booked on the maiden voyage of the adventure right now. But as we've said on the show, we're not 100% clear whether he's going to actually go, or we're going to reschedule that, because the interesting thing about the adventure is they did not do restrictions on the maiden voyage like they do on maiden voyages for all of the other ships. And I'm not exactly sure why, but it is to the benefit of course, the sailor, because it doesn't lock you in. Of course, if you're a concierge, your deposit is locked in, but you can move your sailing date. No, no big deal. And actually, Brian and our friend who are going, who are scheduled to go or reserved to go, they're actually in an inside concierge stateroom.
Yes, which is crazy.
Which is crazy for those of us who are like, wait, that's a thing? Like, that's like, yeah, it's kind of nuts. Well, I'd love to turn to some of your favorites, Tammy. As someone who is deeply immersed in the world of Disney cruising and who sails obviously very, quite often, I'd love to know some of your favorites. I'm going to give you basically my standard rapid fire round of questioning,
Okay.
but I'll skip the general Disney favorites because I want to hear maybe a few more Disney Cruise Line favorites from you. We got to start at the most important place to start. We start at the very beginning, a very good place to start, and that is your favorite Disney Cruise Line stage show.
Oh, well, it's going to be Moana now, because that was amazing. Amazing.
Right? Now, and you've gotten to see it twice now,
Yeah.
too. Is it still as good as it was on the preview?
Yes, just as good. Yes.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah.
That cast is incredible. So well
Right?
cast. Yeah.
Oh, so good. I'm a little worried for when the cast changes, because it should be coming up soon, right? Because they've all been on for quite a while, because you have to count their contract not just from the maiden when the maiden voyage started or when when the preview started, but even before that, because they were in rehearsals and all of that. But yeah, oh my God, what an amazing, amazing cast. Okay, well, of course you have an A+ for that question. So you're starting off with a bang. I gotta ask, what your favorite rotational dining restaurant is?
Oh, let's see. Boy, that's a hard choice. I think I'd have to go with the Animators, though. I love some of the newer restaurants on the Wish and the Treasure, but I think I'd have to go back to the classic Animators. Although I shouldn't go back all the way to the classic Animators. I like the fantasy Animators. I love
Oh,
Fish,
okay.
and I love the the drawing.
Yeah,
So,
animation magic, absolutely. Yes, love that. Okay, what about your favorite space to relax on a Disney cruise ship? And it can be on any of the ships, so it doesn't, obviously the adult pool deck is different from each ship to ship, or each class of ship. But yeah, what's your favorite place to relax on a Disney cruise?
well, it would be Deck 4.
Yeah, the promenade deck. Yeah. So that means we're not talking about the Wish class. We're talking about either the Dream or the Magic classes. But that's the right answer. Absolutely. All right. What's your favorite onboard activity? Favorite thing to do?
I love trivia. And, even if it's a subject that I'm horrible in, I always enjoy going. It's always fun to try to get a couple of them at least. I love trivia. I love to watch Jack Jacks.
Oh yes, I love Jack's Diaper Dash is
Yes.
so fun.
So good.
Yeah, hilarious. It's always funny too when, on the Wish Maiden voyage, it was kind of hilarious because there were only 2 babies on the whole ship. So that was, yeah, so it's just like really funny to see there only be one heat, and that was it.
Yeah.
All right. Well, what about your favorite? We got to talk favorite bar space. There's a lot to choose from now that we have the Treasure and the Wish, because I feel like they really upped the ante in terms of bar spaces. Although I absolutely love all the spaces on the Fantasy as well. But yeah, which one is your favorite, Tammy?
Yeah, boy, that's hard to pick because I would have, the Fantasy and in particular has some great ones. All of them have some great ones. On the Dream, I would have said 687. On the Fantasy, I would say Skyline. But overall, I mean, Haunted Mansion is just so incredibly immersive that, you don't feel like you're on a cruise ship anymore. You feel like you stepped off into the Haunted Mansion attraction, which is incredible that they can pull that off. And they did. The details in there are really impressive.
Absolutely. All right. I got to talk adult dining. We got to talk Remy versus Enchante versus Palo. This is a hard decision because they're all like really wonderful, but for an adult cruiser, well, I guess it depends how adventurous you are. But I guess I'm going to find out how adventurous you are, Tammy. Which one is your favorite? And you can specify, brunch or dinner if you like.
I am not adventurous, but I'd still love going to Remy and Enchante just for the experience. It's just such a really neat experience. And Remy and Enchante have that lemon dessert that's one of the best desserts I've ever had. The one that looks like a lemon.
Yes, I know exactly. It's so funny. I hate that dessert, even though I actually prefer Remy over Enchante, but I hate that dessert. But I'm not a dessert person,
Okay.
and I don't like lemon flavored things that are sweet. But Brian loves it. He loves all things lemon, so he loves it. So that's very. Yeah, that's funny.
If I was picking overall meal, just as far as my food taste, it would definitely be Palo. And I'd probably give a slight edge to brunch. Although I love dinner, but brunch is it has everything.
It has everything. Absolutely. I love that. All right. Aquadunk, Aquaduck, or Aqua Mouse?
Probably Aqua Mouse. I love Aqueduct too. Aqueduct was great, but I don't feel the need to do that every time.
Same. Love that. Okay. I want to ask, before I ask you your favorite ship, I want to ask best ship for families with young children.
Let's see. I'm probably going to say one of the Wish class ships because I think though the nursery, the kids clubs are just so well done, and I really love how they can shut off part of them now, so they can use different spaces for different things and different activities and ages, even different. So I think I would lean towards those. They've all got great kids spaces, of course, but I think I would lean towards the 2 newest ones.
Yeah, totally agree. All right, best cruise ship for families with teens.
but with teens. The dream and the fantasy have that amazing space for vibe, and now vibe and edge, and I'm sure on the fantasy it'll soon be vibe and edge as well. But that's a great space. That's a really, really good space.
Yeah, totally agree. All right. Best for adults only.
Let's see. I love Luna and Sarabi. I think it's a great space for the nighttime adult shows and whatnot. But I also can appreciate the people that like having the adult clubs sectioned off from everybody else. It's harder for someone to just stroll through, and so I would give the edge to Dream and Fantasy, maybe for overall experience there. But there are some individual adult clubs on the Wish and Treasure that I do really like a lot.
Yeah, yeah. I would give it to the Magic and the Wonder because I just really love I like the adult pool deck on the Magic and the Wonder the best.
Yeah, that is very good.
But I agree with you on the bar spaces. Like you've got some really innovative ones, obviously on the Wish class, although the District and Europa kind of being secluded is better on the Dream. So there's a little bit for everyone. Any thoughts about multi-generational cruising? Is there a ship that maybe or class of ship that better caters to sort of all of the groups where they can sort of go to their own places and come back together?
I probably would say Dream and Fantasy for that. They kind of check all the boxes there. And I've done multi-generational with our family on all classes. But I think I'd probably give a slight edge to Dream and Fantasy there.
Yeah, love that. All right. Now, the most important question of them all, which one is your favorite ship, Tammy? Your personal favorite. So this is not like what, client likes, what your kids like, what your parents like. This is just Tammy's favorite. And it could be for any reason whatsoever.
So Tammy loves new ships. I am very partial to new ships, and I love to try new ships on other lines. I love to try new ships on Disney. But I probably would have said the Treasure just for that reason. But then when I got on it and realized how amazing it was, then I backed that up 100%. I love the Treasure.
Yeah, I love that. That's awesome. That's my favorite right now too. I wonder if the Destiny will end up being my favorite because I do love the theming that is coming to the Destiny. I love Hero Mini and I love all the Marvel stuff. So I feel like that's going to be a great ship and it's going to have some of the wonderful things from the Treasure, although that's controversial. Not everybody likes that in fact, Brian doesn't like that even though he loves the Haunted Mansion Parlor, he doesn't like that Haunted Mansion Parlor is going to be on the Destiny. And I understand because it doesn't fit the theming. It also doesn't really fit the theming of the Treasure unless you think of the Treasure as theme park theming instead of being adventure theming. But we'll set that aside. All right. Now, my last question for you here, Tammy, is your bucket list cruise. So this is a cruise you have not yet been on. And it doesn't even have to be someplace that Disney currently sails, but I'm going to let you pick. You're going to be doing it on a Disney Cruise Line ship. So you could pick, it could even be something that doesn't work, right? Like you could go on the Treasure to the Galapagos Islands, which we know will never happen. But this is an imaginary, I mean, it should be a real place, but an imaginary cruise that if Tammy could do this is what you would do.
Okay, let's see. I luckily have done the Galapagos and Antarctica.
Oh, nice.
Those would have been my top two answers for sure, but I've already done those. So right now, my big bucket list that I have not done yet is Australia. And that's my seventh continent. It's my last continent to do. And so my plan is in next January when I go to Singapore, I'm also going to go to Australia, where not that they're that close to each other, but when I'm all the way over there, I might as well, knock them both off, go to Australia, New Zealand, and, so
when you're already traveling 30 hours, what's another 12, right? Or 16 or whatever it is between Singapore and Australia. But you're out in the Pacific. It does make more sense than coming from the East Coast of the US and go to making separate trips, of course.
Even my husband, who probably will not be able to go with me, said, all right, that does make sense.
I love that. Well, awesome. Well, thank you so much, Tammy. I want to give you a chance to tell people where they can follow along with your adventures, where they can find the Unofficial Guide Disney Cruise Line 2025, and if they wanted to book a Disney cruise with you, how they can find you there as well.
Okay, yes. Let's see, I'm on Instagram, Cruising with Tammy, The book is sold on Amazon, is going to be your easiest place to get it, but it's sold everywhere. It's sold Target.com. It's sold online all over. I'm already working on the next book. I've already started 2026 here. So
Oh, amazing. Of course. I mean, you got to start early, right?
you do. Yeah, it's amazing how quickly that came up. And what was the last thing you asked me?
Oh, where they can find you if they want to book a vacation with you. Yeah.
Storybook Destinations. Yes, storybookdestinations.com or on Facebook, Storybook Destinations. Yes, I have a great group of agents that are, and I have some cruise specific agents that have done many Disney cruises and other cruise lines and are very good at what they do and can help.
Awesome. Well, thank you again so much, Tammy, for coming on the show. We really appreciate it. And we'd love to have you, of course, come back on the show to talk more Disney cruising,
All right.
to talk about the book, but we got to talk about the Adventure and the Destiny when they come out, of course.
Yes.
So I'll just say thank you and leave it at that.
Thank you for having me.